Welcome back to another episode of the Lonely Liberal Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Zankin, and I'm so happy to have you on this Wednesday episode. My God, we got a good one for you today. Are you pumped up? I'm pumped up. Well, I mean, it's an interesting topic. It's not going to be so surprising to many of you listeners that we got a real problem with money in politics, and especially at the federal level. And I wanted to talk about today who's already beginning to flood the midterm elections with money, because it's actually pretty early in the cycle. It's May 6th. You know, so most of the primaries are underway. Some have been finished, but we're pretty early days in retrospect of when these kind of PACs, right, these political action committees, that's what PAC means, by the way, get dumped their money in. So it's already amazing that we are on track to crush the records, sadly, of the most money spent by PACs in any election in American history. That was, of course, held in 2024, and shocker, it is being broken in 2026. And we literally, like I said, we're not even at the general election yet. So today, what we're going to be talking about is the top 5 PACs who have already started giving money in terms of dollar amounts. So the 5 PACs that have spent the most money. And we'll go from 5 to 1, work our way to the top. You know, a dramatic countdown. You know, it's a lot more fun. So we got a lot to talk about. And without further ado, let's get to it. All right, before we get into the list, I want to give you guys a little bit of context on basically how Citizens United broke American elections and paved the way for all of this super PAC drama. Remember, PAC means Political Action Committee. So in 2010, in January 2010, the Supreme Court ruled on the Citizens United case, and we'll talk about what it did. But before it, right, corporations and unions were banned from spending money directly on federal elections, okay? So they weren't allowed to spend. That's the pre-Citizens United rules. What Citizens United did in this 5-4 Supreme Court ruling, right, it said that corporations had First Amendment rights to free speech. And what that means is that they said that spending money is speech. So by limiting corporate spending, you're actually breaking the Constitution. That's what this decision did. So the big change was saying corporations can't put money into elections. Now they can, right? And what happened was the creation of the Super PAC, which is this political committee that can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money as long as they don't directly coordinate with candidates. So as long as, Mike Johnson isn't on the committee or isn't getting the money directly or working for the committee, they can't technically do it. But they can have their buddies do it, which is exactly what happened. And this decision, to the surprise of probably none of you, had an absolutely massive effect on campaign donation. So let me walk you through the effects, just a little bit of a timeline exercise here. So in 2010, the first post-Citizens United decision, Super PACs spent $62 million. Now, this is only 2 years after the ruling, so pretty crazy just out of nothing, but nothing totally jarring, right? I mean, obviously a lot of money, but nothing that would make you go, what? In 2012, right, the spending hit $620 million. So it was a 10 times increase in, again, just 2 more years from that. In 2020, spending hit $3.3 billion. 2024, $4.1 billion. And what's even more jarring about these numbers, other than the fact that it went from $62 million in 2010 to literally $4 billion 14 years later, is who's donating the money, okay? So before Citizens United in 2008, right, the last major election before the Supreme Court ruled this way, the top 100 donors accounted for just 1.5% of all federal election spending, okay? So the top 100, meaning the people who donated the most money, the 100 most people who spent the most money, they only made up 1.5% of all spend, right? Okay? This last cycle, 2024, it was 16%. Okay? Same number of people, top 100, 16 times more influential. And it's not surprising when you see these inflated numbers, right? Another just jarring stat that you got to know. In 2022, 21 families contributed $783 million. Billionaires alone, if you only count people with a net worth of $1 billion or more, contributed 15% of all federal election financing. And so every year basically has set a record. 2022 set a record. And like I said, 2026, this next midterm, is on track to shatter the record in 2022. And we're only in May, right? So this is the context you need to know. This is the history, and this is why Citizens United has been so disastrous to the American political system. And I know we have a lot of listeners abroad. Hello, thank you for tuning in. I'm glad you find this interesting. That's why. If you're wondering to know why is it so busted? Why has the U.S. become like this? This is why, right? So let's take a look at who's donating for this 2026 midterm because, like I said, it's early, but the numbers are already absolutely jarring. So, number 5, we have what I'm calling the GOP congressional machine. And it's actually technically 2-pack, so I'm being a little unfair, but they work together and they effectively serve the same mission. And that is the Senate Leadership Fund, which is aligned with the Senate Majority Leader Thune, and the Congressional Leadership Fund, which is Speaker Johnson. These are the classic GOP PACs. They've been around for a while since this decision, and they are when you think of more traditional super PACs, these are a good example of one you could think of. So far, they've spent $59.2 million just this first half of the year, if you can even count it. And that's basically outpacing what they did in 2022. Interestingly enough, their top donor was Mr. Elon Musk, who gave them all his money immediately after he left Doge and left office. Shocker. Some other interesting donors here are this big hedge fund manager, Paul Singer. You have UK Ambassador Warren Stevens. You have investor Mark Rowan. And it's the same guys. They've been doing this since, like I said, 2010. Those guys have been running it. If you're curious what the major Democratic PAC has raised in comparison, which is called the House Majority PAC, they've raised $21.2 million. So they're getting outpaced probably 2-1 because there's another one too, the Senate Majority PAC, which has done 17. So yeah, so they are basically losing 2-1, and this is number 5, right? So this is a lot of money, so you can understand where we're going here, but you'll see later that this is more of an old model of donation, and what we're about to talk about is a lot more dramatic. At number 4. We have what I'm calling the AI big tech cluster. And depending on how you want to define this, it's between 65 million and 100 million. And the reason why this should be combined is because they're all trying to push the same thing. Deregulation of AI, or do not regulate AI, or do it, rather, regulate AI the way we want you to regulate AI. The biggest contributor in this pack is Meta. So Meta, for those who don't know, Facebook, Instagram, Zuckerberg. They've already announced that they're planning to spend $65 million alone in state-level races to boost AI-friendly candidates, right? And the reason why they're doing this is because a lot of the regulation on AI is actually happening at the state level. So that's why they're focusing a little bit more on state elections than you would, naturally think. Another group that is spending a ton of money is called Leading the Future. They've spent around $40 million, and they're backed by OpenAI's leadership, some of these guys. So they're doing everything, both parties, doesn't matter. There's another one called Jobs and Democracy PAC. This is backed by Anthropic. That's who makes Claude. They're a lot less, but still significant. They've spent around $450,000 in a New York State Assembly race. So again, very local stuff, but again, it shows you what they're focused on, which is state elections. And the argument that they make when they spend this money, right, is that we're protecting jobs, we're protecting innovation. I mean, let's be real. They're protecting themselves from oversight. And it's, again, not candidates who say, I won't regulate AI, because that would never work politically. But they use the word carefully. I'll be careful. I don't want to hurt innovation. And we hear this stuff all the time with a lot of industries, right? Like, we don't want to cripple it with government red tape and blah, blah, blah. Similar stuff, that's AI. Now, before we get to 3, don't forget to subscribe. I know it's annoying, but do it. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Thank you. All right. Number 3, the Fellowship PAC. They're at 100 million, definitely. And what that is a PAC that is explicitly aligned with Republicans that focuses on crypto. There is another PAC that does crypto that we'll be talking about later, but this one is much more partisan. This is explicitly spending money for Republicans. It's linked to Cantor Fitzgerald, which is the investment bank formerly run by Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. So a direct pipeline between the crypto and the Trump cabinet, it seems, which is not surprising, seeing that Trump has made billions of dollars of crypto, but that is for a different day. Check out my crypto episode from like a year ago. It still holds. They've already committed $100 million, like I said, for the midterms, and they've already started spending. They're spending on a lot of these Republican House primaries. They've endorsed Clay Fuller in Georgia. But they're also talking about South Carolina, Louisiana, like I said, Georgia, Nebraska, Kentucky, all these primary races where they can shape the GOP nominee, because primaries matter, right? And that's a big deal. And if you combine them with who's our number 2, which is this PAC called Fair Shake, they have donated around $195 million. So together, it's almost $300 million, which is the single largest industry block in midterm history. So, like I said, this is unprecedented. We've never seen industries donate this much money, and I think it just speaks to how much money the tech industry has in general, because the AI one was number 4, right? So let's talk about Fair Shake a little bit. It's, like I said, a crypto PAC, but unlike the previous one that we just talked about, the Fellowship PAC, this is bipartisan in the sense that they give money to both parties. They're giving it to Democrats. They're giving it to Republicans. They don't give a crap. They just want crypto-friendly policy, and they'll give money to anyone who says they'll do that. Who's behind it? Coinbase, which is obviously a big crypto company, a bunch of venture capital firms, and a bunch of crypto billionaires, basically. The new players of the Silicon Valley wealth, right? Think about those guys. That's who's been given money here. But like I said, they don't care about party, which, again, makes them more dangerous in a lot of ways, because they'll just give money to anyone who's pro-crypto. And what does pro-crypto mean? Light touch crypto regulation, tax treatments that are helpful, and basically just saying, can you make it so the state governments stop cracking down on the industry? Because, again, state governments often are the ones that really can regulate things more with a fine-tooth comb, okay? And this is basically serving, I think, as the template for, how industries want to influence politics. They're not going to just pick a party. They're going to just give money to what they want, because they don't really care about the party. And I think this is something, before we get to our number 1, who definitely cares about the party, I think that this is the trend, is just its identity, its topics. And that's what people need to realize, that it's not about, what a conservative value is or a progressive value is. A lot of the time, a lot of it is just, what do you specifically say about random industries, okay? But that's not the case for number 1. Number 1, by far, is what they call MAGA Incorporated, the biggest player so far in the 2026 midterms. It's not a corporation. It's not an industry. It's the sitting president's personal political machine. They have given already $305 million. So compare that to the number 2, which is 194, 50% more. And they're going to keep churning. That's by far not the end of it. And it's so crazy. It's basically like a presidential war chest without Trump being on the ballot that they can donate. And so who's funding it, you may ask? It's just basically the donors that funded Trump, right? The family members, people who want to get pardoned, all this stuff. Basically everyone who's buying access for protection from the White House. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's what it is. And this has been the group who's been attacking a lot of the Democratic candidates in these special elections that we've seen earlier in the year. They haven't gotten a lot of press, but we've seen a few congressional, House rep stuff go, these special elections. They've been basically the main vehicle funding those ones. And ultimately, what matters here, right, is that Trump isn't going to be on the 2026 ballot, duh, but his influence will be. And at least $305 million that Republicans stay in line. And it speaks to something that I want to talk about a little bit before we close, is that a lot of the times when these Republicans in the federal government, the GOP, are Trump's lapdog and just go, yes, and so spineless. A lot of people listening, I'm sure think this, a lot of people I've talked to think, man, Trump must have something on him. And they say that thinking like he has dirt, like whether it's like a connection to Epstein or something crazy or something like that. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's partially true. But what's definitely true is, you know what he has on them? Money. And that money, more than anything, scares the crap out of these guys. Because if they don't fall in line, he'll just pay for a primary. We're seeing him threaten it all the time on Twitter. And that's what he has on them. So these people, in a lot of ways, are just puppets for money. Don't forget that. So before we go, I actually wanted to talk about a group that you may be surprised isn't on the list. And that is AIPAC. And, of course, AIPAC is the PAC that promotes the Israeli government's views, right? And it is so in the news, right? We hear about AIPAC all of the time. We have now seen a lot from the left, that is, of them, using it as almost a litmus test to be like, do you take money from AIPAC? If yes, I don't like you. And I'm not saying that's wrong to do that. I'm just saying it is by far the most trendy PAC in the sense that if you ask someone to name a super PAC, almost certainly AIPAC would be the one that they would name if they named any of them, right? And it's funny that they're not on the list with how much influence they have. And I'll tell you why it's not a surprise. So AIPAC actually has a PAC above it. Its actual super PAC, because AIPAC's actually not technically a super PAC. And it's called the United Democracy Project. And they've got at least $100 million cash on hand. So that would put them at 3 on the list. So you're asking me, well, Nick, if it's 3, why isn't it here? Because what they're doing is they're trying to avoid the AIPAC branding. Okay? Because that branding, like I said, is becoming a liability. Don't believe me? Well, I'll tell you. 67% of registered Democrats now sympathize with Palestinians over Israelis. Compare that to 18% in 2013. Like I said, refusing AIPAC money has become a badge of honor in these Democratic primaries. You see it with Tallarico, with Plattner, with Zoran. This is becoming like, I'm great, look at me, I don't take this money. So what has AIPAC done? They're hiding the brand. They funnel money through other PACs with more neutral-sounding names. For example, the Elect Chicago Women PAC or the Affordable Chicago Now PAC. These groups don't run ads about Israel, about AIPAC, but after the fact, we find out they're linked. So this is a big deal. So you have to keep an eye on this. But what's interesting also is that this method still may not be working. They tried to not let Tom in New Jersey, and it actually excited his base. They tried to attack ads on him, and it actually helped him out. And in the Illinois primaries, it's not clear. So all in all, in case I just wanted people to know, they've got enough money to be on this list, but they're trying to spend it without showing that they're spending it, or at least not being seen spending it. And I think more than anything, that just shows you where American politics is right now. Hey, thanks so much for listening. If you like the show, give it a review. My God, help me out, man. No, I'm just kidding. I appreciate you if you do. No, I'm not kidding about doing it. Do it. But I really appreciate you. More helpfully, what would be even more helpful would be if you showed people, tell people, share it on Instagram, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Substack. All this stuff really helps, and I really appreciate everyone who does join our community. Become a little less lonely. All this stuff is good. I really appreciate you guys in general. We'll be back on Sunday to do the news like we do every Sunday with Mr. Richard. Until then, take it easy. I'll talk to you later. Bye.